Welcome back to the introduction module for the online English program. In this presentation, we are going to look at the academic roles in more detail and go over all the responsibilities of each member of the academic team. Before we go into too much detail, let's review. The three members of the academic team are the LET, the OET, and the CA. The LET is the English teacher at the school. He or she is the educator the learners interact with on a regular basis and the one who OETs defer to when lesson planning. The OET is the remote English teacher. OETs have class once a week with learners via video conferencing. The OET prepares and adapts materials based on the LET's lesson selections. And of course, we have the CA. The CA is the professional that is in the room during the OEP classes to help with classroom management. A quick reminder, the OET is never physically present in the classroom. That is why the CA is so important to the success of the program. The CA assists the OET as the adult in the classroom with the learners. Each group has 15 students on average. So while not very large groups, having someone in the room to support the OET is vital. Now let's jump into everyone's roles. The majority of the LET's responsibilities take place outside the OEP classroom. This does not make the LET any less important to the program. It just means that their contributions happen before or after an OEP class has occurred. Before any class can occur, the LET must first be familiar with the lessons available. This means looking at the menu of available lessons and reviewing the presentations in the Google Drive. All units for both 5th and 6th grade have menus that can be found both in the Google Drive and in the Handbook Annex 1. It is the responsibility of the LET to know what materials exist for the program and to coordinate accordingly. This leads us into the next point, which is coordinating with the OET weekly. It is the responsibility of the LET to choose the lessons for the OET to teach. The LET must look at available lessons and coordinate with the OET on which lesson works best for the LET and students. The LET and OET then discuss any alterations that need to be made to the lesson at least 2 days prior to the lesson being taught. As part of this coordination, LETs should also communicate whether they are pre-teaching linguistic content, as well as letting the OET know which parts of a chosen lesson have already been pre-taught and which areas might prove challenging to the students. In general, OEP classes should not be used for introducing new material. The OEP is meant to reinforce and enrich already learned language. The LET is also responsible for ensuring that there is an appropriate environment so that the students can make the most of the lesson. Those aspects include punctuality and materials needed by the learners, such as notebooks or paper and pens or pencils. The LET is not in the room during the OEP classes, but it is important that they send the learners prepared to participate. Another way the LET helps to make sure OEP classes are successful is by providing a roster of learner names before the first online English class. This allows the OET to build rapport from day one. Calling on students by name makes a big difference in any learning environment, more so when the teacher is remote. The final responsibility for the LET is letting the OET or RTC know if a class needs to be canceled for any reason. If a class is canceled, the LET should work with the OET to try to reschedule the class. As you can see, the biggest part of the LET's job is communication. LET's consistent and timely communication with OETs is vital to the success of the program. The OET's role operates a bit differently. To make it easier to follow, I've broken up the role into before class, during class, and after class. Let's start with before class. Just as the LET needs to coordinate with the OET needs to be an active participant in that coordination. OETs are encouraged to reach out to LETs before the weekly cycle of classes starts to ensure that they have enough time to prepare their lessons. Which brings us to the next point. OETs are responsible for adapting lesson plans to ensure that there is a variety of appropriate tasks and activities in a logical order at an appropriate pace. Once the LET has chosen a lesson and explained any alterations that need to be made, the OET must ensure those adaptations keep in line with the goals of the class, speaking and listening. It is also important that when preparing a lesson, the OET considers what problems learners might have with the lesson's target language. The OET should make an action plan for how to best address those difficulties and discuss it during weekly coordination with the LET. Along with preparing for learner difficulties, the OET should also plan their instructions carefully. When presentations are provided, instructional styles will vary based on the OET and the students. OETs should think about including visuals, modeling language, and using ICQs to help learners fully understand what they have to do. This also includes pre-planning instructions that may need to be given in Spanish. Lastly, OETs are responsible for starting the call on time, which brings us to the role of the OET during class. It is up to the OET to create good rapport with the students and CA. This is achieved by having clear routines throughout the class, calling on the students and CA by name, and maintaining a safe, friendly learning environment. Since this is an English class, the lesson should be delivered primarily in English. English instruction should be supported by body language, visual material, demonstrations, and tools. Spanish should be used sparingly and only as a last resort or to ease confusion over a difficult or complex task. This also fits into giving clear and simple instructions, checking instructions with ICQs, and modeling activities. The OET will usually work with a student to model activities or target language. Activities can also be modeled by two learners working together. It is the responsibility of the OET to call on students to help or present, though this can also be done with help from the CA. Another responsibility that is done with the help of the CA is the implementation of different interaction patterns. It is the OET's job to provide a series of interaction patterns throughout a lesson. The OET should ask the CA for help getting students into pairs or groups, or to get attention back to the screen for a whole class activity. The OET is the English language expert in the classroom. This means the OET must be the one to provide feedback to the learners. Feedback should always be timely and specific. That means avoiding things like good job and instead giving feedback like great pronunciation of sometimes, or is it he or she, to elicit self-correction. So now we've finished the class. This is where the OETs and LETs roles will overlap. Both the LET and the OET are responsible for communicating with each other during the week to provide feedback on the lessons delivered and to decide the next lessons to be taught. We've now covered everything the LET and OET are responsible for in the online English program. That leaves us with the last key player in the academic team. The CA's role happens solely during OEP classes. At the start of class, the CA sets up the equipment. This involves turning on the TV and laptop, logging into Zoom, and entering the correct Zoom meeting code. The CA also makes sure students are prepared and ready to start class. Students should be properly seated and ready with the correct materials like a notebook and a writing implement. During all interaction patterns, the CA monitors student behavior. This can range from asking students to raise hands, to telling students to listen to their classmates, to move to sit in pairs or groups, or to direct their attention to the screen. Perhaps most importantly, during activities that involve pair or group work where the OET cannot effectively monitor, the CA makes sure students are doing the activity rather than conversing in Spanish. Since the CA is the one in the room with the students, the CA is also the person who explains any learner difficulties to the OET. He or she should tell the OET if the interaction patterns implemented are effective. By this I mean that the students are able to produce language in English rather than talking in Spanish. This isn't limited to academics. The CA should also let the OET know if the technological resources are not working well. Can the learners hear the OET and any media well? Can they see the OET and the slides or media well? The CA will report technical issues during the class to the OET for help troubleshooting. The OETs will have sufficient fluency in Spanish for this type of communication with the CAs. CAs are not required to communicate in English at any time. The last point is one that I hope doesn't happen often, but it is important for the CA to contact their OET if there are any unexpected delays. This can range from logistic issues, like the students are late to the classroom, to technical issues like the TV won't turn on. Thank you for tuning in and learning more about the important members of the academic team. This is the end of the introduction module. Next, we will be looking at communication and how to report issues.